I got fired with good reason because of the conflict of interest. They saw a news article where I was speaking on camera to the reporter, and they contacted me a few days later and asked how it was possible that I could be running a business while being full-time employed. My boyfriend and I, he's now my husband, we decided to start a Christmas light hanging business, which we didn't know anything about. But the only reason we decided to start it was that I ran into someone who I worked with who told me about someone she knew who was doing Christmas lights for a living, making six figures, working 6 weeks a year. And then 2 weeks later, my boyfriend, who's now my husband, ran into someone unrelated and said the exact same thing. Oh, her boyfriend was making six figures, working 6 weeks. These two completely sort of serendipitous moments that met right when we were both really feeling like we need an opportunity, we need something else to do.
What if you turn hardship into greatness, anger into serenity? Everything changes. Make your life a masterpiece. Welcome, I'm Yannick, your host, and now joining me, Anne McGinty. Anne McGinty is an entrepreneur and also a podcast host of How I Built My Business. Welcome, Anne McGinty, to the show. It's such a pleasure to have you.
It's certainly a pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me on.
Who is Anne McGinty in simply one sentence?
Okay, well, Anne McGinty is me. I'm a mom. I'm an entrepreneur, the daughter of immigrants, and a podcast host and storyteller that is passionate about personal growth, learning, making meaningful connections, and empowering other people to live really happy lives and feel fulfilled.
Beautiful. And
That
I
was a
can
long
really
sentence.
tell you have such a great presence. I can tell that you're really on purpose, if you will. So let's start with simply defining business and then ultimately tell us what made you build your own business.
Sure. Well, I started my own business, the first one, back when I was in my early 20s because I was unsatisfied with my job. And I felt like my time was worth more than the value of my paycheck. And so I started to get resentful towards my employer, towards the work that I was doing. But I also knew that I needed the job in order to pay for life and living. So starting a business came more out of a need to want to accelerate my earning potential so that I could get more of my time back.
And it's beautiful. You just mentioned, it's basically you just want to be yourself, right? And I think there are obviously some restraints that you face while working for a big company, for example. So, how has this transition been for you? And also the part of your development. I think it really made you stronger and it really made you, as I can tell, really being now and feeling really on purpose, given your energy.
It wasn't immediate. I mean, I've always had the positivity and the ambition, the drive, the can-do attitude, but in my early 20s, I lived check to check until I was about 26. And then at 26 was when I started my first actual real business that had legs. And that was a big learning experience because my boyfriend and I, he's now my husband, we decided to start a Christmas light hanging business, which we didn't know anything about. But the only reason we decided to start it was that I ran into someone who I worked with who told me about someone she knew who was doing Christmas lights for a living, making six figures, working 6 weeks a year. And then 2 weeks later, my boyfriend, who's now my husband, ran into someone unrelated and said the exact same thing. Oh, her boyfriend was making six figures, working 6 weeks. And they were just these two completely sort of serendipitous moments that met right when we were both really feeling like we need an opportunity. We need something else to do because we're hardly making any money and we can't get ahead. We can't save any money. And so after these two instances, we decided to start a professional Christmas light hanging business with zero experience.
I love that, you know, and it's so telling because right now we're getting close to Christmas. So, and how did they play? Did it play out? Just walk us through a little bit.
So I'll tell you, when we started that business, I was still technically full-time employed as a sales representative for an oral care and body care company. And it was a remote job, so I was traveling to sell more or less toothpaste within a 3-hour driving diameter in the Bay Area. And that is probably why it felt like my time is worth more than this. I didn't have any real purpose in that. I was helping a big corporate company just increase their sales revenue. And so when we first started, we had a lot of, it was drive. We really wanted a solution, an option. And so he and I, if we didn't have any jobs booked, we were out there actively trying to get jobs. There was no down moment. So that first season, I was again gainfully employed in my full time job, making $50,000 a year as a sales rep. And when we started that Christmas lighting business, we operated for less than 6 weeks that year. It was probably only 4 weeks that year, and we made $126,000. So that was straight away our green light that, hey, this concept actually works and we can do something with this. So I lost my job. I got fired with good reason because of the conflict of interest. They saw a news article where I was speaking on camera to the reporter, and they contacted me a few days later and asked how it was possible that I could be running a business while being full-time employed, even if I was operating outside of hours. It just was too much of a conflict of interest. So I lost my job, which was fine. I learned that I could have done it better, but you live and learn, right? So moving forward, we decided to spend the off season actually traveling, resetting, and getting our heads wrapped around how can we grow this next year. And from that point forward, we just kept on, it was exponential growth. We kept on doubling the business. So the next year, double, the next year, double. Like it kept on growing, and we didn't necessarily know what we were doing, but we did figure it out on the way.
That is, I just love this attitude, and really doing it. And just tell us a little bit what you actually did.
Well, what I did, so Mark is my husband, he was my business partner, and we divided and conquered because his specialty is operations and managing people, which is not anything that I'm good at. So I had experience in sales, I understood customer relationship, and I got around the initial fears of what sales is because I think when I first started as a sales rep, just the title alone made me feel like this isn't the industry for me. I'm not a salesman. I don't like it when people are salesy. So I had to get over that and realize that sales really isn't about being salesy. It's not about being greedy. It's just about connecting with the person and having a good understanding of what it is that they need and want, and then presenting to them a solution. if you can, in fact, meet their needs and wants. If you can't, then you're being salesy and you're just trying to sell a product they don't actually need, which isn't what I'm going for. But it was actually quite easy. One of the biggest drivers of growth was honestly our truck. So we got one of those, they call them a box truck. It's like a 14-foot white box on the back of a vehicle. And that's how we were able to store ladders on top and supplies on inside and step ladders inside, and everything that we needed traveled with our first truck. And Mark and I didn't have any money. So we printed out these little elf flyers, 2 on one page at a home printer, probably printed a couple hundred of them, cut them in half personally. And then we also printed out decals, which we cut by hand and taped them onto the side of the box truck. Excuse me. Drove into Park Presidio, which is a public park in San Francisco, with some red spray paint cans and some green spray paint cans. And we spray painted the name of our business with the phone number on the side of the truck. But what was so brilliant about it is that whenever we were parked doing work outside of one house, all of the neighbors saw who we were and what we were doing. And so it was word of mouth. We didn't have to spend any money on advertising. And as long as we focused on delivering a high quality service, great end result. If the customer complained about anything, we listened, we really addressed their concerns, we cared about them. The business took care of itself. The growth just happened.
That is it's really amazing. It's a typical American story, really, how to build your business, and I love that. It takes so much courage to ultimately do such a thing. And so, how did you feel about starting it? What were like the biggest obstacle to overcome to really start doing it?
The biggest obstacles were trying to learn how to put up Christmas lights to start, because there are actual techniques. They're not that hard to learn. There's probably a gazillion YouTube videos now, but there are some basic electrical computations that you need to know so that you can account for voltage drop. There is a technique for custom fitting lights around a portico, around a window, a doorway, anything that you want, so that it is custom trimmed. And then running the electricity in a way that you can't see it, so that when the customer looks at their house, all they see are the lights. They don't know how you've gotten the power, where you've gotten it. But that fell mostly on Mark. And then I'd say the biggest and hardest part for me was probably staffing, because as we were growing the business, we didn't necessarily have full packed days, 5, 6, or 7 days a week to offer our crew. And so we needed to have the crew, though, in order to achieve the load of jobs. It's like, which one comes first? Do you book the jobs and then figure it out? Or do you hire and then just cross your fingers and hope that something comes through so that your new hires don't leave out of lack of work? So the solution we came up with was, Mark said, just book the jobs and I'll make sure that they get done. So he took it off my plate so that I didn't need to stress about that part, and I could really just focus on getting the clients jobs. And then I'm trying to think about complexities way back then. At the very beginning, we were working with incandescent lighting, which is a completely different game to LEDs. So now with the advent of LEDs, the installation of Christmas lights it's like laughably easy compared to what it was when we first started. Beyond that, I'd say it was just getting our systems in place and problem solving, understanding why problems would happen. The first season, we had done all of these installs before Thanksgiving, and then Thanksgiving Day happened. And Mark and I were sitting back. We were in town. We didn't want to leave because we couldn't leave the business. It was brand new. And it started raining. It was pouring. And I think that first day I must have gotten 20 service calls, and we didn't know what the problem was. We didn't know why everyone's lights were going out. And so I just remember saying to him, we've got to go out and figure out what the problem is, what's going on. After that first season, we learned so much about what had caused the problems that for subsequent seasons, we were able to prevent them. But it did take the pain to get to the learning.
So what was the reason? And just give us a time framework. This was maybe 10 years ago.
We started the business in 2006, so we sold it in 2020. And so 2006, the problems were mainly water being able to find its way into electrical connections, including bulbs. So when Christmas lights are manufactured, they're basically made the exact same way. And when they were incandescent, there was a little bulb that would sit in the socket and you could pull it out and you could even replace individual bulbs. But the problem with that was that water finds its way into anything. And if water finds its way into those sockets, it shorts the whole system. So we were not able to reset GFIs. It was it was checking every single connection to see like where is this getting in. We did learn that you could use dielectric grease inside the connections, and that kind of kept the water outside of those connections. When it came to the bulbs, there really wasn't a whole lot that you could do other than really make sure that you didn't break any because they were glass. Now they're plastic. So again, a little bit less of a concern.
Wow, so you really 14 years you dedicated to this business. And then what ultimately led you to solve the business? Because it really seemed super successful, and just the idea and how you progressed, it seems such a beautiful story.
Thank you. We had been talking about the idea of selling. We didn't know when we wanted to necessarily, but just that at some point it would be something we wanted to explore. And what's interesting is that my dad, who was kind of my guiding light for a lot of decisions in my life, and he passed away a few years ago, but I'd say when we were in about year 10 or so, I said, hey, Dad, we were thinking about maybe looking at an exit at some point in the future, maybe selling the business. And he said, you'll be crazy to do that. You'll never find another business that will make you that amount of money and that amount of time with that much time off, because we had more than 6 months off a year. And I was like, okay, all right. And for years, he kept that same mantra, you'll be crazy, don't sell it. But then something happened around year 12 or 13. And I believe it had to do with the timing of his own retirement and his health and his time with all of us and his grandkids. And I brought it back up again and I said, hey, Dad, oh, and I contacted a broker because I got a valuation. I wanted to see what are we talking about here so that Mark and I could actually have a real conversation. And so then I presented that number to my dad and I said, he's saying that this is what the value of the business is. And like the flip of a coin, he said, sell it. And I was like, what? You've been telling us for years that we would be crazy if we sold this business. And he's like, if you can get that for it, sell it and spend the rest of your kids' lives with them being at your house with them, because you can do it. You've already set up enough avenues of passive income. If you can get that value out and you can invest it. And then, he said, you're in a position now where you can do it. And I was like, well, we weren't that far off like a couple of years ago. And you still said we'd be crazy to sell it. And he said, well, things have changed and I don't feel that way anymore. So we decided to entertain the idea of selling it, connected with the business broker who gave us a valuation. And we started working on the prospectus package, fill it all out. We were in New Zealand. My husband's from New Zealand. And so we were over there. And it was 2019. No, it wasn't 2019, was it? Yes, it was the turn of 2019 coming into early 2020. And COVID was shutting everything down. And we were a business that put lights up in places where people congregated, talking like zoos, amusement parks, public event type venues where parties are happening and city centers. You know, I was thinking in my head, nobody's going to be able to do anything. We're going to suffer. This is not going to be a great season. But well, let's just see what happens. Let's just list it. We didn't know anything about how long COVID would really take, and we listed it in the spring. Started vetting potential buyers. We did calls where they asked us questions. We were able to interview them to see if they would be the right fit for the business. The business wanted to grow. And we were also at this point where we kind of taken it as far as we knew how to take it. And so we listed it and we ended up selling in September of that year to an amazing couple who were going to keep all of our staff and continue to operate the way that we had been operating while introducing some new services, including building washes where they could put a whole wash on an entire square, say, of buildings so that it looks like the building's been painted for a few months. So they had ways to add in lasers, to add in this next level of art that we didn't. And it was a really good partnership. It was a good handoff. It was a really good handoff, but it was a great business.
Wow, congratulations. That is what a journey, imagine. And tell a little bit more about your father, because he really, and I love this quote, and it really speaks of who you are, as far as I can tell, is why focus on what you can't, rather be grateful for what you can. How much has your father impacted you in your journey and life in general?
I love this question because it's very meaningful to me. My dad was my everything. Like, I put him on a pedestal since I was really young. I really looked up to him. When he would come home from work, he would play with us and make us laugh and giggle. And there were no worries. He was a master gardener. He really had this ability to let go of work when he came home to engage with family, except for when he had a really hard day at work. So if he had a hard day and he lost a patient, or he was a doctor and he lost a patient, or he was really struggling with a patient and helping them to find health, or he was hurting for the hurt that they were feeling, then sometimes he would carry that home to the dinner table. But all that taught me was compassion because he cared so deeply. He was a good doctor. He was the kind of doctor that would do rounds to visit patients, not charging them, but because he really just wanted to see how they were doing on dialysis, or if they were just in the hospital, they were inpatients at the hospital, he would just drop in to say hi. So that was the kind of person that he was. And anytime a situation came up in my life where I doubted or just didn't believe, maybe lacked the confidence, he would say this: don't focus on what you can't do. Just start thinking about what it is that you can do. Because thinking about what you can't do isn't going to help you get anywhere. It's just going to take your confidence away and make you feel like an imposter. It will give you a lot of self-doubt. But if you focus on what you can do, then you'll realize that there are little steps that you can take. You may not know where those steps are leading, but as long as they're in the direction, the general direction of where you want to go, you're making progress. So you don't need to make a big 25% leap in that direction. Maybe just 1% in that direction. Make it a small step, and then celebrate that you were able to do that one step. But that was just one of the ways that he inspired me. My dad was also very savvy with money and was an immigrant from the Philippines who arrived into the United States with just $200. No connections, no family to lean on, and he had to make it work. And when he got his first paycheck, he'd already lasted 2 weeks before he even started his job. And so then it was another 2 weeks before he received his first paycheck. So he was living off of $200 for a month. He didn't have a car. He had to take the bus to work. He couldn't get groceries by car. He had to take the bus. So, but again, that's what he could do, right? So America was an opportunity for him. It was a better living, and he could do these things. So he did them. And when he got that paycheck, he went to HR because he didn't understand the taxes. And he said, there's a problem with my paycheck. I was expecting this, and this is what I got. And the HR person said, look, those are just taxes. Everybody has to pay them. You kind of just got to get used to it, sort of suck it up, you know? She had no compassion for his lack of understanding of the tax system. And so he took $20. He went to Barnes and Nobles, which was a bookstore here at the time that was prolific, I guess, but it's still around, I think, but maybe not as prolific. And he bought 3 books on tax code to understand if there was any way to save taxes. And he started digesting all of this knowledge and just figured out again, well, if I can't do anything about taxes, well, what can I do? So he learned about the deductions you can take for mortgage interest. And, he started looking at how do I get real estate. And by the time I was in middle school, he and my mom had a dozen houses, and they took us traveling around the world, and they sent us to private school. So he turned that $200 that he had for 1 month into so much more. And I may have really dreaded being dragged around to open houses when I was a kid, and hearing them talk about finances didn't make a whole lot of sense to me until I was getting closer to my 20s. But then once I hit my 20s, it all made sense, and it really impacted my approach to my own life and building wealth, and also my approach in general.
Yeah, that's beautiful to learn. I mean, that's outstanding, and I can't imagine. Actually, also my godmother, she's also from the Philippines, and I have many
Really?
obviously people in the family, and also actually New Jersey. My godmother, she's in Switzerland, but her brother is in New Jersey. They are all over the world, and so yeah, they are just outstanding people. I also actually lived for about 2 months in the Philippines. I was working for a special at school. So yeah, very really amazing people. Generally speaking, I can really tell that it's my godmother, her whole family, but also the people there. It's a very outstanding people from the Philippines. I had only, and also when I was working in the north, they actually made come. They flew in young Filipinos, outstanding people too, right? Just because they couldn't really fill the job, so they came in. So it's really funny, so wonderful. So tell us a little bit more about this transition from selling the business and then ultimately starting a new business and where you are at now.
So starting a new business actually happened when we had the other business. So the Christmas lighting business was fully operating, and we had all of this time off. So we decided to start a complementary seasonal business, and that was the Pop Nation, which is ice pops. And we partnered with local farms to take their overripe fruit that could no longer be sold at retail and gave it new life. It had a really high bricks content, which is just a sugar content, which is helpful for making natural ice pops anyway. And we created a new brand. Our tagline was freedom from the scoop. We had these Paletas carts and umbrellas, and we would pop up at music festivals and corporate private events. We would go to big public events. Sometimes there were street fairs, or we used to do the maker fair. And that was a lot of fun. Being in the food industry in San Francisco, you kind of felt like a little celebrity in a way, because for some reason, people put food on a little bit of a higher a little bit of a higher pedestal. I don't know why. Ultimately, it just meant that we started making friends and connecting with other food entrepreneurs in the city, and getting to see them with their brands starting to really grow. Good Eggs was in the commercial kitchen where we were, and that is a pretty large business now. There was Nana Joe's Granola was there. There was a ramen company. So we had this big commercial kitchen space that probably had about 20 stations in it. If you can imagine like a food cooking show, it'd be, a little bit like that, but a little bit more commercial. And we had so much fun with these oversized bowls and electric mixers, and coming up with recipes, doing tastes, and setting up photo shoots. And that was a lot of fun. But we also quickly learned that making a low cost item like that requires so much volume that what is fun at the beginning transitions into a manufacturing type business very quickly. And that's a little bit less fun, more logistics. So we took that business as far as we could go with the equipment that we had. And then we also sold it. We had a couple business partners who are friends with us, Sarah and Tim Stewart. And all four of us were at a point where we were ready to sell that because Mark and I had decided, we really just want to focus on one business. There's a reason why we would go and travel in the off season, and that was to really recharge. And if we went from one seasonal business into another, there was no recharge. So we needed to let one go. And then with our business partners, one of them had to move because her husband got a professorship in the Midwest, and the other one wanted to go back to culinary school. So we all were on a phone call saying, "Hey, would you like to buy us out?" And then the other person was going, "Well, we were actually wondering the exact same thing. We're all at this pivot point where we have new opportunities." And that week, an email arrived with someone asking if they could buy a franchise. And I said, "Funny you should ask. We're not franchising, but we just decided to list the business. Would you like to consider buying it?" And I talked to our CPA and he said, "This never happens. So I don't know what you've done to make this happen, but if they're a suitable candidate to be a buyer for your business, make it happen." And so I was like, okay. And we met with them, shared everything, and we also closed on the business too. So right now, I'm not running a business. I don't have I everything that I make is passive. And the podcast is it's not motivated by trying to make money. I'm not trying to sell a course or become a mentor that someone pays for one-on-one coaching or anything like that. It's really that I got to this point through entrepreneurship, investing, the lessons my dad had taught me, through our experience of running business, and got to a point where it started to just become easier and easier. And at 39, that's when we sold the Christmas lighting business. I took a little bit of time to pause and focus on the family, take care of some health stuff. And when my dad died, though, it really opened my heart up, just opened up my perspective to celebrate the essence of who he was. You're getting ready for the memorial service, and I was going to speak, I was going to say something. And so there was a lot of opportunity to reflect on who did my dad want me to be? Like, what were the lessons that he really taught us? And how can I live more like how he lived? Because he did it so well. And that is when I just started noodling on ideas like, can I somehow share this information with people? Is there a way that I can do that? And the podcast kind of just came up as an idea. And then I just started it. So that is where we are now.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that. And so tell us a little bit about the journey in terms of your podcasting. But I just want to come back a little bit to what you were saying about sales and connections. And it really seems to me that what really gave you so much life as well are ultimately the process that allows you to really make those deep and lasting connections through business.
You want to know how I was able to make the connections? Is that the question?
Yeah, just in general, like, because this to me, it seems that you really strived in that there was such a nice, balance between business, but also, making connections and really building true friendship, which I think that's also a big part of it, that it's not just transactional, but it really can develop something much more and much more deeply that you might have, that you might be able to imagine.
I think that people, again, they often associate sales with the need to sell something, which is at the core, I suppose that is what you're doing. But the transaction of the sale is much more likely to happen if you're actually meeting the need of someone else's sort of what they need, right? So it's, to me, the connection really is all that matters. And I would never want to offer somebody a product or a service that they didn't actually need, because it feels pointless. It feels inauthentic. So with connection, so it comes so naturally to me now. My husband has actually talked about this before because he thinks it's one of the super skills that I've kind of developed. When I approach, let's say there's a guest even that I want to bring on my show, and the guest is someone that on the outside, other people would think, why would that person ever want to talk with you? Like, who are you? You are nobody compared to this person. You don't have a platform. You don't have their fame, or just we're not at the same level caliber, right? And there are certain guests who they won't. They won't come on a show unless you have a certain following, or you're going to end up pushing more sales their way. Those aren't the people that I want to bring on my show anyway, because the people that I bring on are the ones who are doing it for the listener. They're being selfless. They may get their business name mentioned, but they're not coming on the show so that I sell their product. They're not coming on it for promotion as being their number one reason. And 99% of the pitches that I receive for the show are for promotion. And it is a lot of noise to filter through. When I approach a guest for coming on the show, let's say it's an international bestseller and it's a book, I'll probably read the book first, because I want to make sure that the message and the story, the content, the topic is a topic that I would truly enjoy speaking with somebody about, and that they have a communication style that I think would resonate well. So that's kind of the first step for me, is getting to know the person. So as much as I can, and you don't want to get like stalkerish or anything like that, but you do want to see, like, what can I learn about the other person, whether it's through the way they present themselves, through the way that they talk, the things they choose to talk about, the things that they say are important to them. And in a sales transaction, you could actually just ask the person, what do you like to do? Tell me about yourself. How long have you been living here? So is this for you? Is this for your kids? Like, whose benefit is this for? And you just get to know them. So it's the same thing happens again when I'm approaching a high level guest, is I get to know them through what they've written, what they've said, whether it's a TED Talk, or maybe they have a speaker reel, maybe they have some sort of content I can find. And it just makes sure that the message that they're sharing with the world is something that I am happy to also support. So again, like, I'm not going to bring somebody on who's says, well, I'm a master class in sales. I'll get you from 7 to 8 to 9 figures. And it's like, that maybe is like a little bit too cold to me. It's just too transactional. I'd like to know a little bit more. There's got to be a deeper connection, deeper story there for me to feel excited for them to come on. And then when I pitch them, it usually starts with, hi, so-and-so, I'll say their name. I've just finished reading your book, blah, 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 blah. And I will extract a few key points that really spoke to me. And it won't be something that you can read on the back of the book. And it won't be something you can read in the first chapter, because those are the pitches I receive. It's like the person read my bio on my website, or they maybe looked at the show notes to see what the show is about. And you can tell, because the first line is, I'm a fan of your show. Let me tell you who you should have on it. And this person's so great for XYZ. And it's like, so cold. It's just, to me, it's not rocket science. It doesn't take that much time. Spend an extra 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and just craft it in a way so when the person opens it, you stand out. So if I say, after talking about what the person wrote, and I say, I really like these sections because XYZ, I might mention a little bit about myself just as a connection. And then I'll say, which led me also to watch your video that I found on YouTube about XYZ. Here's what I like about what you're doing. The first two paragraphs are all about the other person. And then after that, I'll say, here's a little bit about my show. This is who I'm looking to bring on. Do you have any interest in being a guest? Because I don't want someone to come on unless they want to come on. So both of these kind of, to me, they fall into sales because, again, it is connection. And with our Christmas lighting clients, I would follow up with them. I would sometimes even send them a Christmas card or just say like, oh, hey, I noticed you got a new dog. How has it been with the puppy? Or, my gosh, your kids have grown so much. Or where are they going to college? And, then they know you're paying attention to them and they matter to you beyond the service.
But I think this is really what it makes life so beautiful. It's really the simple things, the simple things that we pay attention to, that we can somehow relate to one another, because we have so much common denominators, that we actually share. So therefore, there's always, again, it comes really back to, why focus on what you can't. In other words, why should we focus on what we don't agree? Rather, let's focus on what we actually share, we have in common, right? So we can do something positive for ourselves and, of course, the world. So that is really beautiful. So tell me a little bit about what is the thing that makes you most proud of in your life. I think it's probably an easy question, but I'm really curious about what are you most proud of in your life now?
That's a great question. I don't think it's going to be what you're thinking it might be. What am I most proud of? I think it's my family and my kids and my husband and our relationship and this home that we have, which is very peaceful. And we really teach our kids kindness, but also work ethic, work hard. We want them to do well in school, but we don't pressure them. So it's this challenge of, how can I keep my kids motivated to want to do a good job for themselves? Not necessarily because mom and dad are going to be proud of them, but because they can be proud of themselves. So I'd say the thing that I'm the most proud of is raising our amazing children. They're incredible humans, as are all children. With the right nurturing and love and support, all children are amazing. And they just need to believe in their own limitless potential, which kind of comes from those around them, but maybe starts in the home environment and a belief. It's like that, why focus on what you can't do, rather focus on what you can. But if you don't have someone at home who's teaching you that you have to believe in yourself, you have to know that you can do it, you have to see the steps you can take. Don't worry about the shot you missed. Ready? Take a deep breath, refocus. What's important now? Get back in the game. Don't let things really beat you up. And it's a challenge for kids more than it is for adults. Well, actually, I don't know if that's true, but it is in my circumstance. The kids, they right now just need self-belief more than anything. It's They get all of the support from us, and so now it's like phase 2. How can I make sure that they're ready to launch into the world? And this process is very rewarding.
You know what? It's funny because this is what I had in mind. For me, it was like clear that you will mention the family because, this is also partly why I was really interested in talking to you. I can really see like the positive attitude that you have and the blessing that you are to your family, husband, and kids, right? And I think that's really enlightening. And it's always wonderful to talk to, family who took on like woman and man who took on the responsibility of having still kids. It's huge. And so my question is, how has your marriage and also your children changed your life?
Oh, I love this topic. Nobody ever asks me about this. It changed everything. It changed everything because our oldest is now 13. So he was a baby when we were starting. Well, we had started, but he was a baby when we were in the midst of operating our intense Christmas lighting business. And it was a lot to juggle to add a human in the mix who needed more attention and care than the money making career job business. You know, if you were to prioritize, you would say, okay, health and safety of the baby should come first and then the job. But there's a little bit of a juggling act because you need one in order to support the other. So it just helped to refocus the priorities. And my husband is from New Zealand. The way that things are done in New Zealand is pretty different to America. So I also think that his culture and our time going back and forth between New Zealand and America has been very grounding. We're just about to leave to go there on Thursday. And I'm so excited because when we go, we're not on our phones. We don't have any Wi-Fi. We don't have any cell service. We'll be there for 3 weeks. We have a camper van. That's all we've got. So then we live out of suitcases. We've got surfboards and fishing rods and boogie boards and wetsuits. And we just meet up with friends and family, go to the beach, camp, have great time, barbecue, just live. And I can almost guarantee that hardly anybody is going to ask us what we're doing for a living or anything about our work because it is just a little bit less of a part of one's identity in New Zealand. Some people might disagree if they live in Auckland. Auckland is a little bit more like America, but if they live outside in the smaller communities, for the most part, Kiwis are designing their work around their lifestyle. And so that impact has kind of carried over. I want life to be fun. I want to have time to do the things that really light me up. Go on hikes by the coast or go out boating, fishing, surfing, sailing, just be outside and appreciate nature. It's, yeah, between the kids and my husband and all the travel that we do together as a family, I just say that number one priority is that the kids have a nice, safe environment where they feel supported to learn, grow, develop, and that they feel capable once they're ready to go out into the world. And it's fun. Does that answer? I feel like I went a little bit on a tangent there.
Not at all, not at all. I fully agree with especially also beliefs, right? That you have to cultivate that. That's a lifelong process. And if you can instill that already in children, I think then you really set them up for a meaningful and purposeful life. But I just want to quickly go and say that, it's so complex today with social media. It's such a huge trouble, and I think most parents don't really know how to handle that whole rabbit hole. And so to me, what I always think, because I don't have children, and I'm curious what you actually think of that. But one thing is also very important, is that children especially, I see this also in high school, middle school, and so on. They need really also directions. I think to some extent today, and psychological study really show that if you have more than three choices, usually it's just too much for you. You just can't really make more than three. You have to really narrow it down to them to ultimately make a choice, because otherwise you're just overwhelmed. I mean, that's happened all the time in the grocery stores. There's like toothpaste, let's say 20 different brands. It's just like you just don't have time, right? Therefore you stick all the time with the same toothpaste, right? So such a challenge, and I'm just curious how you handle it. And then I also have another question that usually it's in your situation, right? And I love that. Do you think like your kid, when it was born and you started the business, I think it was really like a it was reinforcing each other in a positive sense, because oftentimes people think like, you know what, first I'm building my business and then ultimately family is coming. But I think it's not actually the right, necessarily the right thing to think of, because if you have a kid, then even more, or a husband, just having a husband without a kid, let's say, it really gives you a purpose, a drive, that you do something for something much bigger than yourself. So how do you feel about that? Was the kid maybe the main driver that ultimately the business that you were building was a success, or was it kind of symbiotic? How was the relationship?
That's an interesting question. I think that it's complex because when I was pregnant and was still going around meeting with clients, I had to go and meet until the last moment, till I couldn't. And it was harder. And then when he came thankfully in the off season. So he arrived in March, which meant that I had between March and closer to July, August before I had to really ramp things back up again. But it meant that we needed to find a nanny share or a daycare or some sort of childcare to enable us to really focus on the business during the day, working hours, whatever hours we had designated. And because the Christmas lighting business is during the holidays when it should be more family focused and kind of a slower, I mean, it's never a slower pace for anyone, but I like the idea of it being a slower pace. It was very challenging because I felt there was a guilt. There's a mom guilt. There is a little bit of a sadness for not being able to do exactly what I wanted to do when I wanted to do it, which would be, take my kid around and go and hang out with him all day. But there was also a reward of building something that would enable us to create a lifestyle that we knew would cost money. So it was a mix. Yes, the kids are absolutely a driving force behind why we do a lot of what we do. I don't know. I don't even know if they know how much they are, but just about every financial decision we've made has been made with the intention of filling a need for the future, whether it's education, whether it's supporting them with a down payment when it's time for them to buy their first house, whether it is having enough seed money so that if they have a business idea that they would like to get started, that we can give them a little seed money and say, hey, go for it. Even if it's just, 10 grand, whatever it is, 10 grand, go get a business started, see what you can do. So there are those types of decisions, and then wanting again to be able to travel. So take them overseas as much as we possibly could and stay for a while. So, you're in Costa Rica for 6 months or so. We took the kids to New Zealand for 6 months. We've taken them to Europe for months at a time and just really pulled ourselves out of what's comfortable here at home and taken them somewhere where the sights, the sounds, the smells, the language, the everything is different, just to, again, like it's for them, to expand their neural pathways, to create new neural connections, to expose them to new ways of thinking. And all of that, unfortunately, costs money. So yeah, they're intertwined for sure.
No, beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. But it also shows really what an incredible mom and wife you must be, because just given the fact that you have those kind of thoughts and kind of worries. And as you said, right, it's complex. It's really complex to raise a kid. It's not complicated because there's so many things that, you can do the best job, but you can still, or the kid can still, you know, um, ultimately do whatever, so it's a huge job. So that's why I'm always
Yeah.
saying that, my heroes are really parents. It's just it's amazing because it's the responsibility that you can take on. So I can't even imagine. So congratulations for that. And by the way, having a successful marriage is also something that it's huge. I mean, today there is so many things that can you somehow put out of the road. So that is true success in my view, and I can really, it really shines through of who you really are. And so it's beautiful. I'm just coming back quickly what you have said in terms of New Zealand, and that's a place I definitely want to go. That's a place one. There are 3 or 4 places that I can imagine really living there, settling down, and one is definitely New Zealand. It's just absolutely a dream. So good for you that you are traveling again to New Zealand. Tomorrow, I guess. So really exciting. But I just one question is that you mentioned that it's not about like all the time defining yourself about your job, right? And to me it happened the same thing when I did the El Camino just for a week in northern Spain. And you don't have to be religious, for example. I believe I'm a believer, for example, but there is so many people who are spiritual or atheists or whatever. They just do it for, for the journey. It's beautiful. And so there too I started, and you can actually also do it with your family. I mean, your kid will absolutely love it. There's a lot of family also who do it. Some do it just because it's very cheap. In a lot of these herpers that you can stay, it's either free or you pay maybe €8, and you just walk every single day, and it's just outstanding. I can really share with you some pictures. It has been the best vacation. It was only for a week because I had all of a sudden something came up, so I went back home. But it was so rewarding. But there too, I was so happy that people didn't ask me what I'm doing for a living. We never touched those kind of topics. I was so happy because I just wanted to be a normal human being, right? I don't want to define myself. Okay, I do this, I'm a teacher, but no, I just want to be okay. That's me. Let's have a discussion about life. Why you're doing this. Beautiful. Did you see this beautiful sunset or whatever?
Yeah, just connect on something else. There's so much more to all of us than what we do for work. I just think in this country, well, you're not even in America, but in America, it does feel like it's the first question that's often asked in a social setting, and I'm so used to it. I'll answer it, of course, but I also just desire the other sides of what make a person who they are. But the El Camino, the Camino, I would love to do the Camino. I've read a little bit about it, and it sounds amazing. And after hearing you suggest it, I'm thinking we should make that happen.
You know what? There's a book called El Camino, I think, The Pilgrimage, written by Paulo Coelho. He also wrote actually The Alchemist. So this was maybe
Mm.
15 years ago. And then ultimately, I wanted to do it long, long time ago, but I'm not someone, I'm a really poor organizer. I don't like to plan, trips. It's just not my values. So ultimately, basically my mother, she made all the planning for me. And so that's why I did it. And then ultimately, somehow I convinced her to also doing it, and so she went too, and other couple of friends as well, they also will be doing it. So it's a really beautiful experience. But I just want to say that it is really, really rewarding to talk to you, and to having those exchanges, because but I want to say something in terms of work. I also truly believe, and that's why America is such an inspiration. America. It's just a pole that draws you over there. That's why you have all the most brilliant people. They all want to go and end up being in America. I mean, it's just an incredible country. And you're saying, right, it needs to be a balance. But I also truly believe that I think to having a fulfilled life, it's not about making the money, but it's ultimately you making a contribution, and this is oftentimes through a business, right? To having your purpose, and I think the best thing that can occur in your life is to have or do something that you do for a lifetime just because you love it. And if the side effect is making money, beautiful. Why not?
Well, in this country too, the economy is so large. And we've had friends and family come over from New Zealand before, and they've actually said, and I hope nobody takes offense to this statement, but they've actually said, my gosh, if you couldn't make a business work in America, then you're doing something wrong. Because in New Zealand, the economy is tiny compared to here. And there's about 5.5 million people. It's fairly common in New Zealand that someone will own not one business, but maybe 3 or 4, because the amount that people spend, like consumerism isn't what it is over here. So they have to, in order to make enough. And then on top of that, they have to be extra creative, really good with customer service, great branding. Everything has to be a good, tight little package, or they won't make it in New Zealand. So that's what they mean when they come over to America and they see the abundance of how people spend here and the abundance of opportunity. And it does feel, I mean, that's what my parents saw over here too, which was just, they saw what you can do, not what you can't do. They saw what you can do. There's a lot you can do here. So, yeah,
Second last question. What's the number one advice according to you to start building a business?
I think that there are a lot of questions that you probably want to ask yourself before you start a business. And that is because people start businesses for so many different reasons. So, like, is it just to make money? Is it for the challenges or the creativity? Do you want to create a $1 billion unicorn? Do you want to make $1 million? Like, do you have a passion you want to explore? Do you want to be able to travel and live in other countries and not be tied to an office? Is there a world problem that you want to solve? And do you want to retire early? Do you want to leave a legacy? So, a lot of people start businesses for so many different reasons. Often it can be that they want to have control over their time and their money. But after that, there is that extra layer of just at least thinking about like what it is that you want to get out of your business. Why are you starting that business? What are you hoping for? If I were to start a business, I would start it, for example, to create a brand, establish it as a brand, to build it, get the systems in place, and then to exit. So I would build with an exit in mind. But I can definitely say that of the many people that I've interviewed, some people have said, I want to leave a legacy. I want to change the world. I want to have so much impact that literally I can say I kept this many tons of garbage out of the landfill. Or someone else may say that I love what I do so much that the idea of retiring, just, I don't even want to because I love what I do so much. So I think, again, you kind of have to know yourself and what it is that you're trying to create. I have not been in business necessarily to create something that I wanted to keep long term for my family, or it's not legacy based. I mean, it was pops, ice pops and Christmas lights. Like, there's not a whole lot of legacy there to leave behind. We did try to like make things better by being environmentally friendly, using 100% LED as soon as that was a viable option, and working with farms to try to help solve the problem of waste. But at the core, we were creating brands and we were creating a business that could thrive and support employees, and then could be handed on to someone who could then take it to the next level or just to continue to operate it. So my advice again is just to think about what you want, and think about also what is the lifestyle that you want to live. Do you want to work weekends? Do you want to work while your kid is at school, for example? Do you want to have a brick and mortar? Like, that's overhead, right? So that's extra risk. There's more to spend there. Do you want a low cost business you could run out of your garage? Do you want to have just, the traditional 4 weeks off a year with public holidays, and that satisfies you? One of my big motivators was I want as much freedom with my time as I possibly can. So that really guided my decisions with the seasonal businesses. So what is the life that you want to live? And maybe if you can figure out how much that life costs too, and what that means for the level of time you would need to dedicate in order to turn that business into the income that you need to make in order to support the lifestyle that you want to live. The other motivator for me was that I really wanted to reach financial freedom as soon as possible. So I was able to delay gratification and take that money and invest it instead. And that worked out very well for us. So that was something I really desired. And I can't say that other people would necessarily agree. So know your why before you jump in and start a business, and know that there are probably a million ways to make $1 million. I look around right now with just as I go around town and I see signage for businesses advertising different services or different retail shops, or often I think, gosh, if that person just did something with their branding, they could bring in so much more business. Or I'll interact with a service provider, whether it's a plumber or a roofer or something, and the way that they handle customer service is just lacking. And so that to me is a problem. That's a problem that can have a solution. So you if you're just starting a business because you want to make money, there are an abundance of ways to do that. So again, it comes down to the time. Like I even just think service businesses, skilled trades. I had a plumber come the other day. He was here for 15 minutes and he charged $385. And I thought, that's a scam. Like that's ridiculous for 15 minutes. Okay, here's a problem. It needs a solution. Is there someone else that's out there that can do it better? I sure bet you there is. So there's an opportunity, right? So pick something you think you could do. You can learn it online. You can go to YouTube. You don't have to get a college degree in it unless you need to do that for, the specific career choice. But then, yeah, just it's probably easier to say this in the point where I am now. So I don't want it to come across as just, like tone deaf. But it is actually quite easy in this country to make $1 million. You just have to really pick the industry, the niche that you want to work in. You got to nail your branding. You got to invest in your outward appearance of what your trucks and your uniforms and what everything looks like. You need to deliver A+++ service. You need to build relationships with your clients, and you'll just eventually get there. But you don't take those steps and you give your client a $385 bill for 15 minutes of work, you're going to lose a customer and they're just going to go somewhere else. So, yeah, a lot of opportunity out there.
You're such a great seller. I love what you were saying. It's really, really profound. It really makes me think. No, really, I think it's brilliant what you're saying. And I really appreciate that you're so honest. Yeah, and it's also that's what I love so much is just this ability of Americans to be able to sell something, truly that really comes from their heart. I think it's just there is no one better than the Americans to really convince people for whatever. And truly, you embody that. So I really appreciate that because I will draw huge lessons from what you were actually telling me. So it just tells me, but also how you actually live it. You embody what really your father taught you. That was why focusing on what you can't, rather be grateful for what you can. Last question: what makes you feel alive?
What truly makes me feel alive is the moments in my life when I can reflect back. If someone were to ask you, what was your favorite day of your life? Right? So these moments start popping up in your memory. And you're like, well, I had been hiking in Everest National Park for 3 weeks and I made it to the top of Gokyo-ri at nearly 17,000 feet. Like, that was a good day, right? Or, oh, when I was sailing in French Polynesia and a pod of about 50 dolphins came and they started jumping and all the kids were screaming and laughing on the front of the boat. That was an amazing day. So the moments that make me feel alive are the memories, and the ones that make me want to create more memories. You make it to the top of a mountain. Like my husband and I, Half Dome's not a huge mountain, but it's still quite a long hike for a day because I think it's 18 or 20 miles or something like that. But when you get to the top, I'm sure the endorphins are going, the adrenaline, the dopamine, you did it, you reached a goal, you did something hard. And those make me feel really alive. So I can remember being in the ocean when we were living in New Zealand, and my husband and I we'd go surfing after we dropped off the kids at school, and the morning sun was pink and the surface of the water was glass. And so it perfectly reflected the pink. And even as I was sitting on my surfboard looking around at me, the surface of the water looked pink. And I just remember taking my hands and throwing it up and laughing and just utter joy and feeling so alive and thinking, this is living. Like, this is amazing. So it's those moments and watching my kids grow and see them challenge themselves, do something for the first time. Like my oldest is quite shy, and he recently became trained to be a sideline ref for soccer. He was the youngest in the class, so he really had to push himself outside of his comfort zone to even take the class. And then when I dropped him off at the first game he was going to ref, I said, "How are you feeling?" And he said, "Nervous." And I was like, "You're gonna do great. Just try to relax, enjoy it. You're making $35. Be happy about that." And then when I picked him up, I said, "How was it?" He was like, "It was not that scary. It wasn't that bad." And you just saw the growth happen right there, like right in front of you. And um, now after like twice a week after an interview or so, my husband really put this one out there. He's been wanting me to incorporated into the schedule for a while, but he's saying, let's just close your computer and let's just go for a hike. So a couple times a week, as long as it's not raining, shut that computer, go out to the beach or the coastline and find a hike and just go and hike together, and just it kind of extends that feeling you get after an interview. I don't Do you get that way after an interview where you just feel like inspired and enlivened just from connecting? Like, do you get that?
Yeah, absolutely. But it is, to me, it's a challenge online. It's not the same energy when you meet someone really in person. That truly I feel, to me, that's the greatest gift, is always when I actually meet people in person. And it doesn't have to be a podcast, it can just be just a conversation about life. God, does God
Yeah.
exist or not, or whatever question. I think this is truly
I
what
love
gives
that
me
question.
all the life, right? So yeah, I totally. But of course, through online, I think that's, to me, still, I a certain challenge, just being kind of like in front of a screen. So it's kind of, it's energy sucking, to me at least. I think it all depends what kind of
It
personality
is.
you are.
I think that it is as well, and, like, as I'm looking at you now, every now and then the camera will get glitchy and it just kind of does this pixelated thing, so I can't even make great eye contact with you. But there are these delays. I notice when I stop talking, there's just a few seconds pause, and then you'll start talking. And so those glitchy techie things, they do disrupt the connection a little bit, but it's still, there's something still, I think, about just a human to human having a conversation with the hopes of there being something that someone else could glean from that conversation, is just feels rewarding. So, yeah, I think, just to circle back to what you were saying about when I feel the most alive, it's definitely not when I'm on my cell phone, and it's not when I'm doing work on my computer. It's usually when I'm outdoors with people and connecting that way.
It's so true, and I think this is so beautiful because it really, it brings us back to the really roots, who we are. It's really, we are who we are because of the connections, right? That's how I can somehow define myself, it's because I meet you, and vice versa. And that's why I'm so hopeful for the future, given the fact that there's so many challenges as well, right? But I think we go really back to the basics, and we ultimately, again, we realize what's really important, right? That's really, I think it's the biggest quest, really, what really life is and reality, right? It's these questions on McGinty. Such a blessing, really, to me, and really to the world. Thank you so much for your time, and especially to your family, your husband, and your kids, that I could take 1 hour, 1 hour and 50 minutes out of your day.
Yannick, thank you so much for inviting me and for doing the show that you're doing. I think you're also doing wonderful work out there, and I really appreciate the opportunity to have an hour of your time as well. Thank you.
And McGinty. That's why knowledge matters. Make your life a masterpiece. Visit now programs.the-ykm.com. Meant to make you grow.